We're back with another viewing guide, this time Superman, covering all the way from 1941 to the present day. It's morphin' time! Hello, this is Soundout here, and on today's video we're doing how to watch Superman from 1941 to present day, being 2025, time of recording right before the release of James Gunn's Superman film. This is probably the widest range I've ever done on a viewing guide, and I have covered topics like Kamen Rider or Ultraman, which date back, 50 plus years, but we're talking that we're going back to the 1940s with this viewing guide, because this guide is specifically about Superman and very close related characters. So the way I've structured this guide is that if you want to experience different versions of the Superman story outside of comics in the form of movies or TV shows, whether it's animation, live action, etc., just movies and TV shows, this is going to be your guide to that. I'm going to be doing less explaining what each show is about and more about explaining what its differences are to other iterations of Superman. Superman is the most famous superhero in the world. We all know the story. Rocket comes from Krypton, carrying the baby Kal-El. He lands on Earth and is raised by two people known as Martha and John Kent. They raise him to be the person he is, which is Clark Kent, also known as Superman. Because he's of Kryptonian heritage, he is superpowered on Earth. It is one of the greatest stories that we've had in fiction. It's inspired so many others. There is so many layers to the Superman story of someone coming from another world to coming to a new place and being a source of good and helpfulness and hopefulness and a symbol for hope and so many other things. There's so many ways to interpret the Superman story, and there has been in all these decades since. So we're going to be covering everything that's been put to screen for Superman. Now, this won't be including things that are specifically Supergirl. Talk to me in a year when the Supergirl movie comes out. We'll probably be doing this again, and it'll be Supergirl focused. This one's going to be focused on Superman. I am including Superboy in both Clark Kent as a kid Superboy, as well as Connor Kent, the clone of Superman Superboy, because I feel like we're not going to do a separate Superboy guide anytime soon. Also throwing in some Krypto sprinkles for everyone that wants that, and mentions of Lex Luthor and other things. Also important to this is I will be talking about Lois Lane and Jimmy Olsen appearances, even if they appeared without Superman, because we're kind of going for that core group. Superman, Lois Lane, Jimmy Olsen, Lex Luthor. Those are the four characters we're focused on, and this will be a fun time to go through. And it's going to be a long one. I'm just going to warn you ahead of time. I have no idea what the runtime on this is going to be, but I suspect it's going to be long. I have like 22 pages of notes. It's going to be fun, and I hope you enjoy it. And if you do enjoy this video, please hit the like button. Lets me know you enjoyed it, lets YouTube know you enjoyed it, sends it out to more people, and hit subscribe and the notification bell so you don't miss out on future viewing guides and other videos on the channel. This is the last video in Superman week, so there's 3 other Superman related videos you can go check out right after finishing this one. Also, there's a playlist of all the viewing guides I've done so far. This is my regular series on the channel, and I absolutely love doing these. And a couple last quick notes before we begin the guide. First things first, I'm not going to be mentioning where anything is streaming because Warner Brothers has been moving their streaming stuff all around so much that as soon as I record it, it's out of date. So we're not going to worry about that. We're just going to talk about physical media releases if you're looking for everything. And then secondly, let's give a highlight to our wonderful thumbnail artwork. Darkclaw643, our artist for the channel, has done an amazing job here and done a great celebration of Superman. So on that note, we're going to get started. We're going to go all the way back to the beginning and go all the way up to the present day. It won't be exactly chronological, but there will be chapter markers in the description if you want to go to a specific section. I have broken it down the best I can. Let's go. It's the Superman viewing guide. So like I said, we're starting all the way back in 1941 with the Fleischer Studios Superman cartoons. Now these were the first on-screen appearances of Superman characters outside of the comics. However, it's not the first adaptation. The first adaptation was actually the radio dramas, which would air on a regular basis and were incredibly popular. They featured actors playing the characters over the radio, because before television, people listened to radio and they had to do a lot of things with their imaginations. We are far, far away from that. But the radio dramas are very important for the history of Superman, as well as the history of several other things in different media and all kinds of stuff. But the important part here is that Bud Collyer and Joan Alexander voiced Superman and Lois in those radio dramas, and they voiced them for the first 9 shorts of the Fleischer Studios cartoons. Now, like I said, television didn't exist yet. These were actually shown theatrically prior to films and would be shown in installments, because when you went to the movies, it used to be more of an event-ish. The thing is that you would not only get the movie that you were going to see, but you would get pre-roll stuff. There would be a cartoon or two, there would be a newsreel, there would be movie serials, which were short chapters in a story, and so it would encourage people to go to the movie theater each week to see the next part of that movie serial. More on that in a moment. But theatrical cartoons were part of this, and this is where the Fleischer Studios cartoons come from. Now, important thing to note, they are all colloquially called the Fleischer Studios cartoons, all 17 of them. However, the first 9 were the only ones actually produced by Fleischer Studios. And that is because there was an issue with the actual Fleischer Studios name. The Fleischer brothers broke up, and then the rest of the cartoons were produced by Famous Studios. So those other 8 were actually under a different studio name because the Fleischer Studio had to close due to legal reasons. So for the Famous Studio shorts, Superman is now played by Lee Royce, and Lois Lane is played by Barbara Wilcock because they recorded those in New Jersey as opposed to New York, where the radio drama was still going on, and so Bud Collyer and Joan Alexander had to continue their duties on that and couldn't jump over to record for the cartoons. So there is a bit of a voice change, but they're all kind of in the same performance, and they are the same continuity. Now, as a note, because these are cartoons from the 1940s, there is some material that would be deemed culturally insensitive and borderline racist. In fact, there's one episode in particular that I think is straight up racist. That is the nature of history. It is not a clean thing, and you can't wipe it away. But this has been well preserved. There is DVD sets of it, there is a Blu-ray set of it, and they are technically in the public domain, so if you are looking for them, you can find them incredibly easily. A lot of established stuff about Superman actually kind of sort of starts in these cartoons and the radio as it is, and so you get a lot of establishment. In particular, Clark Kent and Superman having very different voices and vocal inflections. And that makes these a very important landmark in history for not only adapting comic books, but also for the Superman characters in general. In 1948, the first live-action Superman debuted in Superman, a 15-chapter movie serial starring Kirk Alyn as Superman and Noel Neill as Lois Lane. This also featured Tommy Bond as Jimmy Olsen, and this was our first live-action Superman appearance after the Fleischer cartoons. And in particular, like I mentioned before, movie serials were done weekly in theaters playing before a movie, and a lot of these chapters end on cliffhangers, wanting you to come back week after week to see what happens. And that's kind of the cool part. Also, fun fact about movies, very common practice up until, I'd say, like, maybe, I think Psycho was the first one to make a big deal out of it, which is that movies would just run all day, and so they'd be like, well, the movie starts at this time, but people would come in late, wait and watch the whole movie in a weird out-of-order cycle. Very common practice. Kind of think about the way that, like, museums play movies in theaters or video stuff. It's like you kind of come in at the middle, and then you're like, okay, I'll watch this. It ended. Okay, I'll start it over. Oh, that's where I came in, and you leave the room. Kind of how movies used to go. So that's why a lot of these movies were bundled in with a bunch of stuff, so there was an easy break point to know when the movie ended and when the cycle was starting over again. With that all trivia aside, this is a great good old time because movie serials are kind of bonkers, especially superhero ones of this era. Now, this was actually successful enough that there was a follow-up in 1950. That being Atom Man vs. Superman, same cast with Lyle Talbot being added as Lex Luthor. Though Lex Luthor here is not exactly how you would expect him to be, he's a lot different than the usual adaptation. Now, if you are looking for these movie serials, there was a physical DVD set release containing all of them, which is pretty awesome.
Faster than a speeding bullet, more powerful than a locomotive, able to leap tall buildings at a single bound.
So you've had radio shows, you've had cartoons in theaters, you've had movie serials. Let's take Superman up to the next level. The first theatrical Superman movie, 1951's Superman and the Mole Men. This starred George Reeves as Superman and Phyllis Coates as Lois Lane. This movie itself is a big deal because it's the first real superhero movie, because we had gotten a bunch of movie serials during the 40s, and now we're in movie territory. This was an actual theatrically released standalone movie. And what's really cool about it was popular enough that it spawned the first ever Superman TV series, The Adventures of Superman. So the movie essentially acts as a pilot for the series. In fact, I think I read somewhere that they split the movie into 2 episodes for re-airings and stuff. But basically, Superman the Mole Men led right into Adventures of Superman. The series lasted from 1952 to 1958 for a total of 6 seasons. Now, interestingly enough, Phyllis Coates stayed on as Lois Lane for the first season, but Noelle Neal, who played Lois Lane in the movie serials, became Lois Lane for seasons 2 through 6 of the series. Of note, the first 2 seasons of the series were in black and white, but the remaining 4 were in color, hence the reduced episode count because color film was more expensive than black and white film. If you're looking for this series, it's on DVD. They did 6 individual season sets, and the first season set does contain Superman and the Mole Men, so you have the entire series in one package, which is pretty cool. It's kind of a shame we don't have like a Blu-ray complete set, but maybe it'll get one since a lot of the Superman shows are getting them recently. Now, the series was popular, and it was ended for multiple reasons, and there was some other real-life unfortunate circumstances that we're not going to get into here that caused the series not to be continued. However, there were 2 attempted pilots to continue the series in a brand new form. First of all, in 1958, there was the pilot The Adventures of Super Pup. This is not a Krypto show. Krypto didn't exist yet, or he did, and they just didn't think about it. This is Everybody's Dogs Now. It's a little horrifying. This did not get picked up for series. That being said, Super Pup was played by Billy Curtis, and Pamela Poodle was played by Ruth Delfino. Interestingly enough, this was released. It's not lost media or anything. It's a DVD bonus feature on the Superman Ultimate Collector's Tin set or the Superman Movie Anthology Blu-ray set. They were like, we have to get this out into the world, and it's out there. It's fun. I think the premise is bizarre. Now, in a more logical sense, there was a 1961 pilot called The Adventures of Superboy, which was Clark Kent as a boy, as Superboy, good old Smallville days. So you have Johnny Brockwell as Superboy and Bunny Henning as Lana Lang. Now, they had written 13 episodes for this series, but only 1 was produced as the pilot was not picked up to series. And if you want to watch this pilot, it's a bonus feature on the Smallville complete set. I think both the DVD and the Blu-ray have this as a bonus feature, which makes total sense. Both of these really should have been included with the Adventures of Superman sets because, you know, they were attempted continuations, but this was kind of like the other Superboy series initially before they did the Superboy series, before they did Smallville, so kind of makes some sense. So the next Superman series we got was The Adventures of Superman, which was a TV series by Filmation. Officially titled The New Adventures of Superman, this was an interesting show because it had 3 segments per episode. 2 were Superman and 1 was Superboy. And so the first season in 1966 lasted for 36 episodes in that same format. 2 Superman, 1 Superboy for your little half-hour block. 1967 season 2 only had 16 episodes, same format because it was bundled in with the Aquaman show as the Superman Aquaman Hour of Adventure. And so those 2 shows were aired together in an hour block, but the Superman part of it was still 2 Superman, 1 Superboy. Season 3 has 16 episodes in 1968, and this was aired alongside The Adventures of Batman, which meant it was the Batman-Superman Hour as its programming block. For your cast members, Superman was once again Bud Collyer, and Lois Lane was once again Joan Alexander. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, if you go back to when they started on the radio serials to the Filmation cartoons to this series, I think they have the longest runs ever on Superman and Lois as characters, because I think it's 30 or 31 years on these characters. Let me know in the comments if I'm wrong on that, but I feel like they actually have the longest run from first appearance to last appearance on Superman and Lois Lane. The series also featured Jack Grimes as Jimmy Olsen and Ray Owens as Lex Luthor. And for the Superboy segments, we had Bob Hastings as Superboy. And Bob Hastings would later play Commissioner Gordon in Batman the Animated Series. So who knew those were connected, but here we are. And naturally, Lana Lang was in the Superboy segments, and she was played by Janet Waldo. Now, unfortunately about this series, if you're going to go try to watch it, all of the Superman segments were released across 2 DVD sets, the complete Season 1 and the complete Season 2 and 3. They do not contain any of the Superboy segments because when they went to make the DVDs, there was an ongoing legal battle over the rights to Superboy between DC and the Siegel and Schuster Enterprises. So because of that, they've never released the Superboy segments. There may be some VHS recordings of some reruns running around out there, but it's a little bit harder to find the Superboy part of the show because only the Superman one has received a physical media release. Alright, let's talk about Super Friends. Super Friends is a high nostalgia point for many, mostly because it was on the air for 12 years. Let's talk about all the seasons of Super Friends. Season 1 from 1973, 16 episodes. Season 2, 1977, the all-new Super Friends Hour, 15 episodes. 1978, Season 3, Challenge of the Super Friends, probably the most famous iteration, 32 episodes. 1979's Season 4, The World's Greatest Super Friends, 8 episodes. 1980's Super Friends, 8 episodes. 1981's Super Friends, 6 episodes. 1983's Super Friends, 8 episodes. 1984, Super Friends Legendary Superpower Show, 16 episodes. And 1985's Superpowers Team Galactic Guardians, 10 episodes. So legally 9 seasons. They just changed the title a whole lot, except they didn't for seasons 5 through 7. Anyways, that's a lot of Super Friends. Now, the big point here is that Superman appears in this series voiced by Danny Dark, Lex Luthor appears voiced by Stanley Jones, and Lois Lane appears voiced by Shannon Farnon, and then Mary McDonnell Lewis in the Superpowers series specifically. Now, Superman is a main character of this show. He's in the intro. I'm not going to list all the episodes he's in, because it's most of them. But that is your Super Friends rundown. That is all one connected continuity that also has comic book tie-ins. So if you can't get enough Super Friends, you got that going for you. If you are looking for Super Friends, luckily, Warner Brothers, which previously released all the volumes out of order in a chaotic, completely insane manner, have now put out a complete Blu-ray and DVD set where you get all of it in order, which is a great, great thing. TMNT can't for some reason. Now, while Superman had the first superhero comic book movie with Superman and the Mole Men, the first one to make a big splash in not only budget and box office was 1978's Superman, also known as Superman the Movie. This movie, starring Christopher Reeve as Superman, Margot Kidder as Lois Lane, Mark McClure as Jimmy Olsen, and Gene Hackman as Lex Luthor, is one of the most famous adaptations of the character and highly regarded by many to be the best adaptation of the character. This movie is pure magic, even all these years later. At the time of its production, it was the most expensive film ever made, and that's because they were shooting Superman 1 and 2 concurrently. Director Richard Donner was tasked to do 2 movies, and so they were doing them back to back, which was actually kind of the first time that really ever happened. On top of that, if you talk about Superman 2, there's a whole big controversy with that, but the first Superman film was finished by Richard Donner and released into the theaters to great acclaim, leading into its inevitable sequels. So Superman 2 had the same returning cast from the first movie, and there are 2 different versions of this. Director Richard Lester, known for The Beatles' A Hard Day Night amongst other films, was brought in to work on Superman 2 when they kicked Richard Donner off the project due to creative differences between the studio and Donner. If you think that sounds familiar, stay tuned for the DCEU. But the point being is that Superman 2 in theaters is a much different movie than the original Richard Donner cut that was intended. There are a lot of similarities and a lot of footage that is shared between, but because Richard Lester wanted his own directing credit, to his own credit, if you're going to come in and direct a movie, want to make it your own, got that, he did reshoot a lot of this movie, so there is a lot of differences, even down to certain plot points and certain characters that appear in the same plot point. So Superman 2, the theatrical version, that was available and released in 1980. The Superman Richard Donner cut for Superman 2 was released in 2006 after fans said, hey, we want this original cut of the movie, can't you release it? You still have the stuff, right? And all but 1 minute of the movie was still recoverable. They did have to use some early test footage to kind of piece it together, so it's not exactly a clean director's cut, but it does show you this alternate version of Superman 2. Which one is canon? Technically both, because Superman 3 doesn't reference Superman 2 enough for it to be a problem. Now, 1983, Superman 3, not so beloved, and it is really weirdly tonally different. The first 2 movies are distinctively superhero movies. This one is distinctively a comedy with a lot of slapstick. This will either work for you or it won't work for you. This movie is also starring Richard Pryor, who has a bigger role than Margot Kidder's Lois Lane. That feels wrong in some way, mostly because of Superman, but good for Richard Pryor. Now, proving the success of these movies and also shifting the actual production around from Warner Brothers to Canon Film, the 1984 Supergirl movie is in the same continuity as the Superman films. Now, Superman does not appear in this movie, but Mark McClure's Jimmy Olsen does. So you have the same Jimmy Olsen, it's connected, it's in the same universe. Helen Slater plays Supergirl. Otherwise, we'll talk about this more in the Supergirl viewing guide, which will probably come in about a year from now. And then Christopher Reeve's last appearance as Superman, Margot Kidder's last appearance as Lois Lane, and Gene Hackman's last appearance as Lex Luthor was in Superman 4: The Quest for Peace, an anti-nuclear war movie that got incredibly silly by the end. One of the weird things about Superman 3 and 4 is they didn't use any of Superman's normal villains besides Lex Luthor, so they just started inventing ones like Nuclear Man. If you are looking for these movies, all 5 movies and both cuts of Superman 2 have Blu-ray releases. Supergirl is only on Blu-ray, while all of them, including the Donner cut, are on 4K, so you got plenty of options to find these films. Now, if you're looking to get into Superman, there really is no better place than Superman the movie, and watching all the sequels is fun. A lot of people say just watch the first 2 since they are kind of the most thematically similar, but I also think it's good for historical purposes to watch all of them to understand how good we have it with franchise filmmaking these days. I mean that a little bit hyperbolically, but at the same time, not really. So following the success and notoriety of the Christopher Reeve Superman movies, 2 Superman projects started out in 1988. The first one was Superman, the 1988 Ruby Spears production, also known as Ruby Spears Superman because we need some signifier that used the name Superman with no subtitle too many times. James Gunn should have never changed it from Superman Legacy, I'm just saying. Anyways, Ruby Spears Superman is one of the coolest Superman adaptations you probably have never seen. This lasted for a single season of 13 episodes and was not only produced by Ruby Spears Animation, which did pretty good high-quality animation in the late 80s, its head story editor was Marv Wolfman of DC Comics fame, and that gave it for some really good notoriety. It also used a remix of the John Williams Superman score as its main theme song to let you know what era it came out in. With character designs by artist Gil Kane and a pretty loaded cast, we have Bo Weaver as Superman, Ginny McSwain as Lois Lane, Mark Taylor as Jimmy Olsen, and Michael Bell as Lex Luthor. You should check this series out. It did get a complete series DVD release, and I highly recommend it. It's actually, it's like really cool because it's like late 80s, so it's a little bit more sophisticated than some like the Super Friends era stuff, and it's actually like really well written. Like I said, Marv Wolfman was the story editor on it. Recommend this one quite a bit. Our other 1988 series was Superboy, a live-action Superboy TV series. This series, from 1988 to 1991, was a 4-season live-action TV series about Superboy. This is Clark Kent as a teenager Superboy, not the clone thing, that hadn't happened yet. This first 2 seasons were titled Superboy, the second 2 seasons were titled The Adventures of Superboy, so it sometimes is referred to as different things online. It's all Superboy. Interestingly enough, after season 1, John Hames Newton, who played Superboy in this first series, was actually let go, and so they had a new actor, Gerard Christopher, who played Superboy for the rest of the series. And then we had Stacey Hyduck as Lana Lang. So this is an interesting series because there actually is several DC Comics writers who wrote for the series. Mike Carlin, Andrew Heffler, Denny O'Neil, Cary Bates, J.M. DeMatteis, Mark Evanier, among others. So it has a bit of comic book pedigree behind its actual creation, which is pretty awesome. If you're looking for the series, the first season was originally released as a retail release, put on hold because of the Siegel and Schuster lawsuit stuff, and then every season after that was re-released by Warner Archive, so it is out completely on DVD if you are looking for it. Rolling into the 90s was a pretty popular adaptation of the characters, Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman. The Lois and Clark part of the title is to put the emphasis on the Lois and Clark relationship, more so than the Superman stuff, but there's still plenty of superhero action throughout. There's also a lot of weird adaptations of DC characters throughout. The 90s was a fun time. Lasting from 1993 to 1997 for a total of 4 seasons, this series saw Dean Cain play Superman, Terry Hatcher play Lois Lane, Michael Landis as Jimmy Olsen in Season 1, and then Justin Whalen as Season 2 through 4 Jimmy Olsen, and John Shea for occasional appearances as Lex Luthor. Now this series is actually pretty influential on comic book history because the Death of Superman storyline was subbed in the comics in place of a Lois and Clark wedding because they were told by Warner Brothers, you can't do the wedding in the comics until we do it in the show. So yeah, corporate synergy gave us Death of Superman, one of the most celebrated Superman comics, and overall a huge event. So, synergy machine sometimes giveth and it does taketh away. But in this case, Lois and Clark was a pretty beloved series and people do really enjoy it. It just recently got a Blu-ray complete series set, and there are DVD sets out there. So yeah, if you're looking for Lois and Clark, shouldn't be too hard to find. If you all thought I have thrown a lot of information at you quickly throughout the rest of this video, this next one's a connected universe with other shows. The DC Animated Universe! We're going to start with only the Superman parts. If it involves Supergirl or any other characters, we're not worried about. We're just focusing on what does Superman appear in during the DC Animated Universe. And naturally, that starts with 1996's Superman the Animated Series. For me personally, this was like my early introduction to Superman outside. I think the Christopher Reeve movie and then this were like my basis of Superman. And that's actually a pretty good basis. This series did run for a total of 3 seasons, but I got to break it down season by season because there's a lot of notes in here we got to talk about. So, first things first, Season 1, 13 episodes, pretty straightforward. It introduces characters. They were all aired out of order, but all modern releases have them in the proper production order, so you're good to go. Also, it starts with a 3-parter, so you know where to begin. Season 2 lasted 28 episodes, and the series would air not just weekly, but multiple days in the week, because that's how Kids WB airing schedule was. Now, there is a crossover with Batman, which is episodes 16 to 18 of this season, which is World's Finest Part 1, 2, 3. That was released as the Batman-Superman movie back in the day on VHS and DVD for all you early 2000s kids. This crossover did start to lead into a new programming block called the New Batman Superman Adventures block, and that was where episodes of Superman would air alongside the New Adventures of Batman, which was the quote-unquote 4th season of Batman the Animated Series. Now this is interesting because Superman would air weekly as part of the Batman-Superman block, but it also would air during the week, so there was actually more episodes airing of Superman than there were Batman. Now, the 3rd season of the show lasted for 13 episodes, was still part of that block, and had crossover appearances by several other DC heroes, as they were going to be leading up to having a Justice League within the Superman show for its 4th season. However, a 4th season wasn't produced because Kids WB wanted a teenage Batman show, and that's how we got Batman Beyond. Now, fun fact about this as well is that, technically speaking, by air date, the last 3 episodes of this season are a season 4, but I'm just kind of bundling them in with season 3 for simplicity. Now, in this series, Superman was voiced by Tim Daly, Lois Lane by Dana Delaney, Jimmy Olsen by David Kaufman, and Lex Luthor was voiced by Clancy Brown. These are kind of quintessential iconic voices for these characters, in the same way that Batman the Animated Series spawned iconic voices for its characters. You can get the entirety of Superman the Animated Series on Blu-ray in a great little complete set, fully restored in HD. Great stuff. Highly recommend that set if you want this series. Now, like I mentioned, there was other appearances of Superman in the DC animated universe. In Batman Beyond Season 3, Episodes 11 and 12, The Call Part 1 and 2, it was a future-set Justice League story showing the Justice League of the future that Batman Beyond is in, which, you know, is 50 years from now, whenever now is. And Superman appeared in that as an older man with gray temples. Very interesting storyline, and he was one of the major characters. If you're looking for that episode, it's on the Batman Beyond Complete Series Blu-ray. Also, Superman did appear in Static Shock for Season 3, Episode 12, Toys in the Hood. Toyman shows up to Dakota, Superman follows him there, Superman and Static have a team-up. This is available on the Static Shock Season 3 DVD set. Interestingly enough, this crossover did happen during the Justice League show, but there was a Justice League crossover in Static that didn't feature Superman. Just this one episode had Superman in it. And speaking of Justice League, running from 2001 to 2003 was Justice League, and 2004 to 2006, Justice League Unlimited. These 5 seasons together make a cohesive narrative of the Justice League of the DC animated universe. Now, in these seasons, George Newbern now voices Superman as opposed to Tim Daly, but it is the same Superman from Superman the Animated Series. Also, Dana Delaney returns as Lois Lane, and Clancy Brown returns as Lex Luthor, who is a major villain, especially during Justice League Unlimited. Now, I'm not going to list all the episodes that Superman is in, because much like Super Friends, he's in the opening credits, he's one of the main characters, he may not be in every episode, but he is in most of them. And also, there's a lot of cohesive narrative stuff, especially in Unlimited, where you don't want to be jumping around episodes too much. Looking for this series, there are individual season sets for Justice League, and a complete set for Justice League Unlimited. Now, in 2019, we got a follow-up film to the Justice League Unlimited series, Justice League vs. the Fatal Five, and Superman is the main character in that, once again voiced by George Newbern. This movie is also a great continuation of that universe, and one of my personal favorites. And has a lot of great Superman moments in it, though it is more focused on Legion of Superheroes member Starman, as well as Green Lantern Jessica Cruz. But Superman is a major figure as part of it. It also is the coolest appearance of Mr. Terrific, and I have to recommend it for that alone, because Mr. Terrific is one of the most underutilized characters. I can't even make a viewing guide for him. It'd be like a minute and a half long. So the DC Animated Universe has a lot more besides that, but that's the Superman-focused stuff, in case you're just looking for the big old blue guy. Now, there was a major Superman series in the 2000s that was a bit of a cultural touchpoint. Smallville. Lasting for 10 seasons from 2001 to 2011, this series saw the young exploits of Clark Kent. Him as a teenager, going through high school, graduating high school because the show is still popular, had to go somewhere, going to Metropolis for the first time. This series takes Clark Kent on a massive progression and has some of the deepest character work outside the comics for all the characters involved. Mostly because it was 10 seasons of 20 to 22 episodes per season. And they were hour-long episodes. There was a lot of drama, there's a lot of crazy chaos, there's a lot of good storytelling, a lot of serialization, a lot of episodic stuff. It's pretty much a little bit of everything. Except Superman in a suit. You don't actually see him in costume because the whole show's leading up to that. Now, Smallville as a series did start to introduce more DC heroes towards the later half, like characters like Green Arrow show up in full costume, and they did some cool stuff with the Justice Society. So there's a lot of cool superhero stuff in case you're not into the drama side of it, but it's got a nice mix of both things. So in this series, Clark Kent is played by Tom Welling. We have Lana Lang as the main love interest initially with Kristen Cruick. Michael Rosenbaum's legendary performance as Lex Luthor. He's one of the highlights of the show. Erica Durance as Lois Lane, as well as Aaron Ashmore as Jimmy Olsen. Now, those characters are not in every single season. They kind of come in and out depending, like Lois is introduced later, Jimmy's introduced even later than that. But, you know, Superman and Lex in particular, Clark and Lex, are kind of the main characters of the show for the most part. Now, if you finish Smallville and you're just kind of craving a little bit of an epilogue, Tom Welling and Erica Durance returned as Clark and Lois for the Crisis on Infinite Earths Part 2 as part of the CW's Arrowverse. Now, that is Batwoman Season 1, Episode 9 if you're looking for it, but there is a scene in that special that actually features the Smallville characters and shows kind of an epilogue of where they ended up. If you're looking for Smallville, the complete series set has been released on Blu-ray as well as DVD. Does not contain the Crisis on Infinite Earths episode. You have to go seek out Batwoman for that. But you get pretty much everything else for Smallville within it, which is pretty awesome. So our next segment is going to be called 2000s Animation, because Superman did appear in a lot of stuff without actually having his own animated show in the 2000s. They're letting Smallville be the Superman show. So first things first, 2005's Krypto the Superdog lasted for 2 seasons. It's focused on Krypto as the main character, played by Samuel Vincent. Other characters including Shrieky the Supercat, Ace the Bat-Hound, that sort of thing. Superman did appear in episode 1, voiced by Michael Dangerfield. Now, this series was released completely on DVD. It is very much aimed at a younger kid audience, as Krypto is kind of more just kind of done as talking animals doing superhero stuff, and he like befriends a kid and stuff. It's adorable, it's fun, it is a great little series. In 2007, during the 5th season of The Batman, Superman did appear for the Batman-Superman story, the first 2 episodes of that season, and the last 2 episodes of that season, Lost Heroes, as the whole season had an arc about the Justice League kind of coming together and working with Batman. Now, this was interesting because they actually brought back George Newbern from Justice League to play Superman. Dana Delaney and Clancy Brown returned as Lois and Lex, respectively, and so it kind of had a little bit of a DCAU crossover feel to it. And the main reason, I think, is because they didn't want to cast new actors, but just kind of do kind of a neat thing, kind of a promotional thing for this new version. They're completely separate from the DC Animated Universe versions. They exist solely within the universe of the Batman, but those 4 episodes do feature Superman and a supporting cast. If you're looking for that, the Batman has a really cool complete series Blu-ray set. Now, in 2006 to 2008, Legion of Superheroes aired on Kids WB. This was a 2-season series, 13 episodes apiece, and is an adaptation of Legion of Superheroes comics where Superboy was part of the team. Except because of the legal thing with the Siegel and Schuster stuff I've already mentioned a few times, they couldn't call him Superboy, so therefore he had to be referred to as Superman, this time voiced by Yuri Lowenthal. This series is pretty great. The first season and the second season have a bit of a time skip between them, so Superman is more of a main character in season 1 than he is in season 2, but there is a mysterious Superman X who's a main character of that second season. This is a great series on its own, regardless of Superman connections, but it is very tied into the Superman lineage. It kind of is the Superman cartoon of the 2000s, and there was a complete series Blu-ray set if you are looking for it. In 2009, as part of DC's direct-to-video movie program, which we will talk more about in the very near future, I promise, Superman Batman Public Enemies was released. This saw a uniting of Tim Daly's Superman with Kevin Conroy's Batman for the first time since the Superman the Animated Series crossover, and was a pretty cool pairing. Also, Lois Lane was in here, voiced by Anne Hinch. This movie was an adaptation of the Superman Batman comic storyline Public Enemies, and because that was an ongoing comic and there was more things to adapt, and this one sold well, in 2010 we got Superman Batman Apocalypse, which was a Supergirl-centric story, and also featured the same returning cast. These 2 movies have great chemistry between Batman and Superman, and it's really, really fun and a fun, enjoyable time. I said fun too many times. It's a long video. I was just going to worry about it. Both movies are available on Blu-ray and pretty easy to find otherwise. In 2011, during the 3rd season of Batman the Brave and the Bold, Superman popped up 3 times. Episode 5, Battle of the Superheroes, Episode 8, Triumvirate of Terror, and Episode 10, Powerless. There were other appearances by Superman where you saw him from the back, saw a silhouette, maybe a boot or a cape or something. I don't count those. These are the only 3 speaking appearances he had where he was a major character. The series is very inspired by the Silver Age, and the voice direction and design work match that. Superman was voiced by Roger Rose, Lois Lane voiced by Sierra Irwin, Jimmy Olsen voiced by Alexander Polinsky, and Lex Luthor was voiced by Kevin Michael Richardson. Looking for these episodes, they're on the Batman the Brave and the Bold Season 3 Blu-ray set. Alright, let's talk Young Justice, aka the stories that take place on Earth-16. Young Justice is living continuity representing the entire DC universe, so because of this, Superman appears through a whole bunch of it. Just a whole lot of Superman appearances, and he's voiced by Nolan North. Also in the series, as a main character who's in almost every episode, is Superboy, who is a clone of Superman, also voiced by Nolan North. And much like Super Friends, this show got retitled a lot. So we have Young Justice from 2010 for 26 episodes, Young Justice Invasion for 20 episodes in 2012, Young Justice Outsiders in 2019 for 26 episodes. There's a whole fan campaign to bring the show back. It took 7 years, but we finally got it back. Thanks, Warner Brothers, for listening. And then 2021, we got Young Justice Phantoms for 26 episodes as well. Also featured in this series was Lois Lane, voiced by Grey Griffin, and Lex Luthor, voiced by Mark Ralston. The thing about finding the show is that the entire thing's on streaming, I think, and on Blu-ray you can get the first 3 seasons, but Young Justice Phantoms has never been released on home video, which is depressing, because I really liked Phantoms and would have liked the rest of the series. There are other things within the Earth-16 universe, but this is focused on Superman, and so those 4 seasons, they feature Superman characters prominently throughout the entire thing. Superman still didn't have his own animated series in the 2010s, so here's his appearances in other things. In 2011 on Cartoon Network, there was a block called DC Nation. They aired DC shows back-to-back, like Young Justice and Green Lantern, Beware the Batman and Teen Titans Go, that sort of thing. Between episodes, they would air these shorts on the weekly, and so there was a ton of these things called DC Nation shorts. The ones Superman characters appear in is DC World's Funnest, Super Best Friends Forever, Superman of Tokyo, DC Super Pets Farm League, Superman 75th Anniversary, and Tales of Metropolis. Basically, none of these have had home video releases, and so you just got to kind of find them and hope they're still around, because a bunch are on the DC Kids YouTube channel, and they get privated all the time for absolutely no reason. Not going into details about voice cast, we got to move on. This one's just kind of like, there's a bunch of shorts, and they involve Superman characters. So Teen Titans Go has been running since 2013 and still going. They are on like their 8th or 9th season. They've had over 400 episodes. Superman has appeared in a bunch of them, but not most of them. Therefore, these are the episodes Superman is in. In Season 4, Brain Percentages, Classic Titans, Justice League's Next Top Talent Idol Star, and TV Night 3. He appeared in 2018's Teen Titans Go to the Movies, voiced by Nicolas Cage, who was originally intended to play Superman in the 90s in a version done by Tim Burton that never came to be. So this is the first time Nicolas Cage got to play Superman, which is pretty awesome. In Season 5, he was in Justice League's Next Top Talent Idol Star Second Greatest Team Edition. In Season 6, he was in the episodes Walk Away, Record Book, Justice League Next Top Title Edition Star, Justice League Edition, Don't Press Play, Keep Going, Don't Worry About It. Season 7, Justice League's Next Top Talent Idol Star Dance Crew Edition, Marv Wolfman and George Perez, my favorite episode of the whole show. You should check that out if you're a comic book fan, because they had Marv Wolfman and George Perez together, like doing an episode of Teen Titans Go. It's beautiful. Doomsday Preppers, Fat Cats, and DC. And in Season 8, he appeared in Teen Titans Action, Toilet Water, Warner Brothers' 100th anniversary. Will there be more Superman appearances? Probably, because it seems like this show is going to keep going till the end of time. I pray for the animators and that ridiculous schedule. Now, in the movie, like I said, he was voiced by Nicolas Cage. In the series, he's voiced by Bill Farmer. If you're looking for the series on home video, Seasons 4 and 5 have had DVDs. Nothing past that has had it. The movie was released on Blu-ray, and that's Teen Titans Go Superman. In 2014, the Lego Movie featured Superman voiced by Channing Tatum. This was a supporting role. He later had a supporting role in the Lego Batman movie in 2017, and in 2019's The Lego Movie 2, the second part. So Channing Tatum, Lego Superman, he was in 3 different movies. Those movies are all available on Blu-ray. Now, not to be outdone, there is a completely separate second Lego Superman that is in the mainline Lego TV specials. He's voiced by Nolan North, and he is in 2014's Batman Beleaguered, 2015's Justice League vs. Bizarro League, 2015's Attack on the Legion of Doom, 2016's Cosmic Clash, 2016's Gotham City Breakout, 2018's The Flash, 2018's Aquaman Rage of Atlantis. He skipped 2019 Batman Family Matters. That just became a Batman thing. And he was in 2020's Shazam Magic and Monsters when they stopped making these specials. All of those are available on DVD or Blu-ray or both. A lot of Lego, but there you go, Lego Superman. Now, the DC Superhero Girls series was a web series, did not feature Superman. The 2018 reboot of it as a full series on Cartoon Network did. He was in the Season 1 episodes The Good, the Bad, and the Bizarre, Power Surge, and Alley Cat, and the Season 2 episode Double Danvers, as well as the 2022 movie Teen Titans Go and DC Superhero Girls Mayhem in the Multiverse, the finale movie for the series. In all of that, he was voiced by Max Middleman. And in terms of finding the series, DC Superhero Girls, the series, never had any home video, only the movie that was the crossover with Teen Titans Go. 2019's Harley Quinn series is a comedy series, an adult comedy series, very raunchy. Keep that in mind when I'm about to say some of these episode titles. Superman and Lois Lane are recurring characters in the series. They pop up a lot. Lex Luthor is a main villain throughout most of it, so I'm not going to talk about the Lex Luthor appearances, but the episodes that Superman and Lois appear in is Season 1's Finding Mr. Right and Devil's Share, Season 2's A Fight Worth Fighting For and Lover's Quarrel, Season 3's Harl Ivy. the very problematic Valentine's Day special from 2023, and in Season 4 they appeared in the first person to come back from a business conference without chlamydia, Tu Buffone, Killer's Block, and in Season 5's The Big Apricot, Pharaonic Man, Big Pasta Dinner, Bottle My Heart, Bottle Episode, and The Mess is the Point. The Mess is the Point feels like a motto for this video. All of those things are available on streaming. Seasons 1 through 3 have Blu-rays, Season 4 and 5 and the Valentine's Day special do not. But there's a lot more Superman and Lois in that show than I remember. And as part of the ongoing series RWBY, there was 2 crossover movies in 2023, Justice League Cross RWBY, Superheroes and Huntsmen, Part 1 and 2. Superman was a featured character in that, and I forgot to write down who voiced him. You get to Google that one on your own. Next segment. In 2013, DC started 2 interconnected universes, starting with the DC Extended Universe, beginning with 2013's Man of Steel, a Superman movie. This starred Henry Cavill as Superman, Amy Adams as Lois Lane. Now, this movie was the basis and the start of the DC Extended Universe. This would be interconnected movies and shows and would kind of expand out, sprawl out, and eventually die off. Now, the important part here is we're talking about Superman appearances. If it's a headless cameo like Shazam, we don't count that. If it's a outline like Peacemaker, we don't count that. If it's a pointless cameo put at the end of a movie to try to sell the box office, even though it was so short you could put it online, we don't count that. Also, if it was a generated CGI image of somebody who's dead, we don't count that. So the rest of the Superman appearances in the DCEU are as follows. 2016's Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice and its extended cut, which is called the Ultimate Edition. Highly recommend the Ultimate Edition if you are going to watch that movie. It makes it 100% better. And then 2017, there was the theatrical version of Justice League, which was done not by Zack Snyder, primarily done by Joss Whedon off of the version Zack Snyder already shot because Warner Brothers kicked Zack Snyder off the project and therefore completely changed the movie. It is Superman 2 again. Except I gotta say that Superman 2, the 2 versions are kind of close together. The Justice League version by Joss Whedon, the 2017 theatrical, is really different than the 2021 eventually released Zack Snyder's Justice League, which is a 4-hour movie. It's literally twice as long and so much of it is different, I consider them 2 different movies. Take your pick your flavor. There's 2 different options out there. That is the last appearance of Henry Cavill's Superman in a major significant role. So if you're looking for Superman stuff in the DCEU, Man of Steel, Batman v Superman, Justice League. Oh, also all those movies are available on Blu-ray and 4K. They're modern movies. They're pretty easy to find. So the other 2013 connected universe is the DC animated movie universe. This was continuing off of the direct-to-video DC movies that had been pretty standalone up to this point. They started connecting them together with the framework of using the New 52 comic storylines as a reference and entry point. So naturally it begins with Flashpoint and it ends with kind of a weird event. So let's go through the ones that Superman appears in. 2013's Justice League The Flashpoint Paradox, 2014's Justice League War, 2015's Justice League Throne of Atlantis, 2016's Justice League vs. Teen Titans, 2017's Justice League Dark, 2018's The Death of Superman, 2019's The Reign of Superman. Both movies were combined together into Death and Return of Superman. There was 2019's Batman Hush, and 2020's Justice League Dark Apocalypse War. So there are a bunch of other movies in between, but those are the ones Superman appears in. In those movies, in Flashpoint, Superman was voiced by Sam Daly, who's actually related to Tim Daly, who voiced Superman on the animated series. In Justice League War, he was voiced by Alan Tudyk, and for the rest of the movies, he was voiced by Jerry O'Connell. Lois Lane was voiced by Juliet Landau in Throne of Atlantis, and Rebecca Romijn in the rest of the movies. Lex Luthor was voiced by Steve Blum in Justice League Flashpoint Paradox to Justice League vs. Teen Titans, and then he was voiced by Rainn Wilson for Death of Superman through Justice League Apocalypse War. So there was a couple voice changes in there, but those are the major characters, and those are the movies they played a part in. And that was kind of neat to have interconnected direct-to-video movies for that time. All of them were released on Blu-ray, and some have 4Ks. In 2015, as part of the direct-to-video animated movies, an attempt was made to make a little bit of a broader exploration of an alternate universe called Justice League Gods and Monsters. It showed Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman having completely different appearances, sometimes being entirely different people. Now, in this case, Superman is one of the major characters, so that's why we have it featured here. Now, prior to the movie, there was a 3-episode web series called Justice League Gods and Monsters Chronicles. That is almost impossible to find because it didn't end up on the Blu-ray for Gods and Monsters, and it was on Machinima's Go 90 platform. So, good luck finding that now that Machinima's gone. It is out there, just not officially. The 2015 Justice League Gods and Monsters movie does work standalone. Those 3 shorts were just kind of a lead-in into it. And it does exist in an alternate universe where Superman had a completely different upbringing. Superman in this version was voiced by Benjamin Bratt, with Lois Lane voiced by Paget Brewster, Jimmy Olsen voiced by Yuri Lowenthal, ironic since he voiced Superman prior in Legion of Superheroes, and Jason Isaacs was Lex Luthor. This was, of course, released on Blu-ray and pretty easy to find. It's unfortunate that Chronicles wasn't included with it when they did go to release it. Speaking of connected universe, the Arrowverse, which was on the CW. There was so many shows and specials and everything connecting multiple series together in a weekly format. There was like 4 TV shows running concurrently. It was the most comic book-like experience I've ever had with TV shows. The CW DC shows felt like reading comics. Some were connected, some weren't. They overlapped. Characters appeared between and forth and back and forth. All kinds of cool stuff. It was kind of a beautiful time. Now, that being said, it did come to an end, and we are looking at it retrospectively. But specifically, when did Superman show up? Because that's what this guide is about. Like I said, we'll talk about Supergirl in our own video in a year from now. So while being teased in the first season of Supergirl in 2016 during Season 2, Superman made his appearance in The Adventures of Supergirl, The Last Children of Krypton, Resist, and Nevertheless She Persisted, played by Tyler Hoechlin, who I think is a pretty fantastic Superman. He made a good splash, and so people wanted him to come back. So during the Elseworlds crossover in 2018, he did return. Now, the crossovers worked across the shows. So Part 1 was Flash Season 5, Episode 9, Part 2 was Arrow Season 7, Episode 9, and Part 3 was Supergirl Season 4, Episode 9. Also during Elseworlds, we were introduced to Elizabeth Tulloch's Lois Lane, and those two were paired up so well together, people were like, can we get a Superman and Lois show? More on that later. Both characters did return in Crisis on Infinite Earths, which was a 5-part event. Part 1 was Supergirl Season 5, Episode 9. Part 2 was Batwoman Season 1, Episode 9. Part 3 was The Flash Season 6, Episode 9. Part 4 was Arrow Season 8, Episode 8. And Part 5 was A Legend of Tomorrow Season 5 special episode. Now, this is a huge event, not only encompassing all of the CW shows, changing them forever, but also the entirety of the DC multiverse, pulling all of the live-action DC material into one extensive multiverse in and of itself, which is kind of amazing. And anytime you see Marvel bring back a legacy actor as an alternate universe version of that character, the CW Crisis on Infinite Earths did that first. So there you go. All right, on that note, Lex Luthor was a major villain in the 4th through 6th seasons of Supergirl, played by John Cryer, and he was in the Crisis on Infinite Earths crossover. This is significant because John Cryer previously played Lex Luthor's nephew in Superman 4: The Quest for Peace. If you are looking for any of these episodes, they are on their individual shows, complete series, box sets, or individual season sets. In 2016, a new Justice League animated series, Justice League Action, premiered on Cartoon Network. 52 episodes of 11 minutes each. There was bite-sized adventures of the heroes of the DC Universe. Superman was a main character in the title sequence, voiced by Jason J. Lewis, and appeared in several episodes. I'm not going to list which ones, because it's most of them. There was also 22 web shorts released online on the DC Kids YouTube channel. The whole series was released on DVD, and the DC Kids YouTube channel still has those shorts uploaded as of time of recording. Now, that being said, this series was unceremoniously put on hiatus and never given a cancellation notice even to the creators of the show. That being said, it is really fun, really enjoyable, and has a lot of obscure DC characters alongside the normal mainstays. Following the success of Gotham on Fox being a show about Gotham City prior to the Batman properly existing, Sci-Fi had their own version with Krypton, and Warner Bros. Television produced a series. It only lasted for 2 episodes of 10 episodes apiece, but this did not feature Superman himself because the main character of the series is Seg-El, Kal-El's grandfather, played by Cameron Cuff, and he was accompanied by DC hero Adam Strange, played by Sean Sipos. General Zod, played by Colin Salmon, was a main villain in this, along with Brainiac, Doomsday, and Lobo, and boy did this show get its villains right, just like Gotham did. It's really funny that the 2 best adaptations of Batman and Superman's rogues galleries are in shows called Gotham and Krypton and don't actually have a Batman and Superman in them. It's wild, but that's just how things go sometimes. Though, due warning, it was canceled and it left off on a cliffhanger. There was a planned Lobo spinoff and a season 3, but those both were canceled and they did not get a proper ending for the series. That being said, it's still worth checking out. In 2018, on the DC Universe streaming service, which was a service that had comics and movies and TV shows, some exclusive, some legacy, and the comics side is the part that's remained today as DC Universe Infinite, Titans was a adult-aimed drama series featuring the Titans. Very dark, very edgy, and it lasted for 4 seasons. The important part to mention here is that for 3 of those seasons, seasons 2 through 4, Superboy was a main character played by Joshua Orpin. Superboy, Connor Kent, the clone of Superman, that's why it's in this guide. Also, Krypto was in this show, and he would catch ballistic missiles and throw them at people. So if anyone says that James Gunn's Krypto is too violent, they haven't seen Titans. If you're looking for the series, it's on a complete series Blu-ray and individual seasons. Like I said, Season 1 doesn't feature any Superman-related stuff, but Season 2 onward does. In another attempt at a connected movie universe, DC Universe Movies, also known as the Tomorrowverse, had a series of interconnected movies, and they aren't technically related to the previous set, but they technically are, but that would be spoilers, so we're going to avoid that. This kicked off with 2020's Superman Man of Tomorrow, a new modern version of the Superman story, with Darren Criss playing Superman, Alexandra Daddario as Lois Lane, and Zachary Quinto as Lex Luthor. This led to several other movies that Superman and Superman-related characters appeared in. 2021's Justice Society World War II, 2023's Legion of Superheroes, 2023's Justice League War World, and the 3-part 2024 movie Crisis on Infinite Earths, which is the animated version because they already done a live-action version on the CW, and this version has Superman in it a whole lot, and a few different ones, but I don't necessarily want to spoil that, so we'll just leave it at that. Those are all the movies he's featured in. There are a couple other movies, but Superman was in most of these, which is kind of nice consistency. In 2021, fans got their wish with Tyler Hoechlin and Elizabeth Tulloch playing Superman and Lois in Superman and Lois. This is a separate series from the Arrowverse. At first, we thought it was in the Arrowverse because it kind of got led into by Crisis on Infinite Earths, but later on in the end of that first season, especially in the second season, confirmed to be a separate universe from the Arrowverse, just has the same 2 lead actors. This lasted for 4 seasons on the CW, and you can get the entire thing on a complete series Blu-ray or individual seasons. The most current Superman show, My Adventures with Superman, is an animated series focused on the Superman characters themselves, and particularly the relationship between Clark and Lois and their best friend Jimmy. It's a great trio. In this series, we have Jack Quaid as Superman, Alice Lee as Lois Lane, and Ishmael Sahed as Jimmy Olsen. This is a very charming series that not only brings in the main trio of Superman characters, but so many of the supporting cast, but really gets down to the essence of what Superman is and who Superman is as a character. There has been 2 seasons so far of 10 episodes apiece, and there will be a 3rd season that is in production right now. In terms of home video, only the first season will be released on DVD, and no Blu-rays exist for anything else, but it is still young days for the show. And it is possibly getting a spin-off because My Adventures with Green Lantern was announced, which does seem to be in the same universe as the Superman show. And then our last connected universe that we're looking at today is the DCU, which is featuring the 2025 Superman movie, directed by James Gunn, starring David Corenswet as Superman, Rachel Brosnahan as Lois Lane, Skylar Desgondo as Jimmy Olsen, and Nicholas Hoult as Lex Luthor. I have not seen the movie as of time of recording, but this is it's not the first DCU project, but it's the big kickoff, the thing to really get James Gunn's led DC Universe off the ground. So we'll see how that all works out. Now, that being said, you may have been like, what about this movie? What about that movie? What about this one? You're forgetting so much stuff. Yes, I am. Just kidding. It's all right here. There's a ton of standalone Superman movies. It's lightning round time. So standalone movies are all movies that have one movie entry, no sequels, no continuations, just one movie, standalone. We have a ton of these, so I apologize if it's not super detailed, but a lot of these titles are self-explanatory, so let's get to it. 2006, Superman Brainiac attacks. Tim Daly and Dana Delaney may be back as Superman and Lois, but this is not DCAU canon, as Jimmy Olsen may also be David Kaufman, but Lex Luthor's voiced by Powers Booth. Continuity-wise, character-wise, does not fit. It does feature Brainiac attacking, as it says, and that's where the continuity issues sort of come in. This was released on Blu-ray, and it was made to promote the next movie, Superman Returns. Now, originally, this was intended to be a sequel to the Christopher Reeve Superman movies and a continuation with actors that are way younger than the characters they should be playing. Specifically, Brandon Routh as Superman, Kate Bosworth as Lois Lane, Sam Huntington as Jimmy Olsen, and Kevin Spacey as Lex Luthor. Now, because of the Crisis on Infinite Earths CW bringing back Brandon Routh's Superman, they established that he is his own separate Superman from the Christopher Reeve version, and that I think works better for everybody. Also, there was a lot of Brandon Routh Superman in that Crisis crossover, and there's a lot of Brandon Routh because he also plays the Atom on the CW shows. 2007, Superman Doomsday was the first of a line of direct-to-video DC comic book adaptation movies. At first, they were just comic book adaptations, and they started doing other stuff. We've already talked about several of them. This was the first one, adapting the Death of Superman arc. Superman this time was voiced by Adam Baldwin, with Lois Lane voiced by Anne Heche, Jimmy Olsen by Adam Wiley, and Lex Luthor was played by James Marsters. This was also released on Blu-ray. 2008, Justice League: The New Frontier, adapting Darwyn Cooke's DC: The New Frontier. Superman was voiced by Kyle MacLachlan, and Lois Lane was voiced by Kira Sedgwick. This is kind of a retro future 60s set type series. The rest of these have Blu-rays, by the way. I'm just not going to mention that part anymore. We got to get going. Justice League: Crisis on Two Earths in 2010. Superman was voiced by Mark Harmon. This is an adaptation of an abandoned DCAU movie script that was supposed to take place between Justice League and Justice League Unlimited. So you'll see kind of elements of that in this movie, but it is not officially DCAU canon because they changed up the whole voice cast, the characterizations, the storylines, that sort of thing. But it does have some of those shades. Like, they explain the Wonder Woman invisible jet. They explain the Watchtower being upgraded. That kind of stuff. It's got elements of what it once was. Also in 2010, DC showcased Superman Shazam: The Return of Black Adam, a short film that is entirely responsible for people thinking that Superman and Shazam are like connected characters and that they should both fight Black Adam. But anyways, great short, George Newbern returns to voice Superman. 2011, All-Star Superman, adapting the Grant Morrison Frank Quitely comic of the same name. Superman is voiced by James Denton, Lois Lane Christina Hendricks, Jimmy Olsen Matthew Gray Gubber, and Lex Luthor is voiced by Anthony LaPaglia. Now, this movie is a good adaptation of that comic and follows that episodic style of what makes the essence core of Superman. 2012 Justice League Doom, a sort of sequel to Crisis on Two Earths. This features mostly returning cast members from the DC Animated Universe. Superman was voiced by Tim Daly, for example. Lois Lane is voiced by Gray Delisle in this version. Jimmy Olsen was once again voiced by David Kaufman. This is adapting the JLA Tower of Babel storyline, where Batman's contingency plans for the Justice League get stolen and used by villains. 2012's Superman vs. the Elite. George Newbern once again back as Superman. Paulie Perrette is voicing Lois Lane. David Kaufman is once again Jimmy Olsen. This is adapting the comic storyline, What's So Funny About the Truth, Justice, and the American Way. When an extreme group called the Elite show up, how do they clash with Superman's ideals, and how do the public perceive both groups? In 2013, Batman The Dark Knight Returns Part 2 adapts the second half of Frank Miller's classic graphic novel series, and Superman is voiced by Mark Valley and plays a major role in this story. If you want the complete story, there's a Part 1. Superman's not in it, but Part 2 he is. 2013, Superman Unbound, adapting the Superman Brainiac storyline. This has Matt Bomer playing Superman, who had previously auditioned for Superman. Lois Lane's played by Steina Katic, and Jimmy Olsen's voiced by Alexander Gold. This movie sees Superman go up against Brainiac, and it is actually like one of the most action-packed Superman movies. I really like this one. 2014's JLA Adventures Trapped in Time, a seemingly tie-in to a toy line that didn't quite exist, but sort of did. Superman's voiced by Peter Jessup, and Lex Luthor's voiced by Fred Tatasciore. This involves two members of the Legion of Superheroes coming from the future to warn the Justice League about a future disaster, and it's kind of a cool little adventure in a little pocket universe thing. 2020, Superman Red Sun, adapting the comic of the same name, with Superman voiced by Jason Isaacs, Lois Lane voiced by Amy Acker, James Olsen voiced by Phil Morris, and Lex Luthor voiced by Diedrich Bader. This is an Elseworlds tale showing what would happen if Kal-El's pod had landed in Soviet Russia as opposed to Kansas. And that's basically where it spins out from there. In 2021, the Injustice movie, which sort of adapts the game, sort of adapts the comics, sort of doesn't do either directly. Superman's voiced by Justin Hartley in this. 2022's DC League of Super Pets, one of the only animated DC movies to be released in theaters. This is actually more about Krypto, who's voiced by Dwayne Johnson, and other Super Pets, and Superman appears voiced by John Krasinski. 2022's Batman and Superman Battle of the Super Sons is a story more with Superboy, voiced by Jack Dylan Grazer and also Damian Wayne Robin, and Superman is featured in it, voiced by Travis Willingham. Lois Lane is voiced by Laura Bailey, and Lex Luthor is voiced by Darren DePaul. This is a movie that's about John Kent Superboy and Damian Wayne Robin, the Super Sons. It's a Super Sons movie, and Batman and Superman happen to be in it. 2023's Scooby-Doo and Krypto 2 is a crossover between Scooby-Doo and Krypto, and therefore Superman-related characters. Superman is voiced by Nolan North, Lois Lane voiced by Tara Strong, Jimmy Olsen voiced by James Arnold Taylor, and Lex Luthor voiced by Charles Hartford. Note, this movie has only been released on DVD, which is a shame because it's kind of wild and has a 2-second cameo from the Legion of Superheroes cartoon from the 2000s. And lastly, for the guide, 2025's Batman Ninja vs. Yakuza League features Koraku, the Man of Steel, also known as Superman, voiced originally by Takaya Kamikawa and then later voiced in English dub by Aaron Campbell. And that is all the standalone movies that feature Superman. Throughout all these decades of history, Superman as a character has remained popular and consistently great for so many people. Everyone has their own generational Superman, the one they grew up with, the one they like the most, the new version that actually reinvigorates their whole love of the character. I love covering stuff related to Superman. I love talking about Superman very clearly from however long this video is. That is the basics. There are probably more details I could get into with every single one of these. I could talk about them extensively, but I hope I kept it consistent and simple, and I hope the visual aids help because I had to talk really fast to get through all of this. I've never covered anything this wide in a single viewing guide before, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, leave comments down below, all that good stuff. Do appreciate all the support on the channel. If you hit like and subscribe and you haven't already, really do appreciate that. If you want to continue the conversation, we have a Discord server. You can join the link below. You can also join as a channel member and get perks like early access to videos and special shoutouts, like these special shoutouts for our awesome channel members. Special shout out to our channel member Captain Tiers, Spin-54, MasterBen95, Forever1000, Super Shaddix Boom, Mr. Smelly Potato, Jamie's World, Jamie Harper, Mars the Star Droid, Patty, Common Spidey, Liam Peterson, Common Jojo, Mohammed Diop, Josh Frisch, K-Floss, Gokai Gamer, Michael, Koopaman, Doge9789, LFIV, and Mach's Dent. Thank you to members and viewers alike for your support of the channel. If you so wish, you can find me on social media on Blue Sky and Letterboxd at Soundout12. You can find my wonderful graphic designer who made the amazing thumbnail for this video on social media and Discord at DarkClaw643. And you can find Hero Club at hero-club.com for entertainment news, interviews, and more. And until next time, this is Soundout saying, up, up, and away!